What's the crack, everyone? It's Ollie from B2B Sports here, back again to talk about that Australian Grand Prix. A little bit of a recap from the race weekend, and my word, it was a dramatic weekend at that. Big switch up in terms of who won the race, thankfully. But yeah, we'll dive into the meat and potatoes of that in just a minute. At this point, I really appreciate if you could give the vid a thumbs up and give the channel a subscription. It really means the world and keeps me motivated to keep producing content for you guys. Much love. And yeah, let's get back onto the F1. Crazy weekend. Let's start from the beginning. Obviously, it's Australia, and the timings for UK fans and European fans on the whole were pretty grim. So in terms of watching FP1 and FP2 and FP3 for that matter, it was very much a case of catching up on socials when I woke back up in the morning and watching highlights here and there on YouTube. I think the big story from the practice sessions was that big decision that James Vowles made from Williams in terms of deciding that Albon will be the driver going forward for that one remaining Williams chassis. Obviously Albon had a bit of a crash in practice and completely destroyed the chassis and some key components to the car, and James Vowles explained in his decision making process that because the team was so behind in the development of this car for this year, because they had a big change in direction over the winter, so because they were behind in development of this car, that the third chassis that would usually be in supply hasn't been able to be developed, and they weren't able to bring it to the race weekend, meaning that only one driver going forward could race this weekend. And as James Vowles said, the decision was that Albon was the driver going forward, with the reasoning purely based on Alex being the most likely to score points out of the two. Incredibly harsh on Logan Sargeant. You know, he wasn't the one that made the error that led to the damaged chassis, and yet he was the one that had to miss out. I'd like to know your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. I think from a moral standpoint, you'd like to see Sargeant in the car and race, but from a purely business standpoint, Alex has been there and done that and got the t-shirt. He's an experienced F1 driver, and time again he's proved that he's the more dominant driver out of the two. Going forward, is that going to affect the dynamic in the team relationship there? I don't know. I think you can get a gauge on Logan's personality. He seems quite a nice, genuine bloke. So maybe there won't be any friction there, but you can certainly see how that situation can spiral. Why did you sign Sargeant if you had no faith in him going forwards? And I suppose my counter argument to that would be whoever they brought into Williams, Alex Albon is clearly going to be the most experienced driver, and so if it's a Logan Sargeant and Nicholas Latifi and Mick Schumacher, for example, I think Alex would still be the one to take that car forward for the weekend. Fast forward, obviously Williams didn't score points in the end, so that decision wasn't justified. Whether Logan could have matched out, we will never know. But my opinion, from a purely business standpoint, I think it was the right decision that James Vowles made. And this is exactly why James Vowles was brought into the team, to make these tough decisions. The overall thoughts going into qualifying and into the race was that Mercedes was struggling. In particular, Lewis had some quite damning comments saying he hasn't felt this bad about a car in a long time. He just hasn't had a great start to the season. I mean, you can argue that George has eked a little bit more out of this car, but on the whole, the two drivers are really struggling. In a Mercedes team that usually get the best out of the team and the car, but over the past couple of seasons, it's just not been the case. I think they're probably praying for the new regs to come in and get this terrible, torrid period over and done with. But the team seem like they're going backwards, and it just seems like Lewis is just mentally checked out at this point. He probably just wants to get this season over and done with and get himself into that Ferrari, which we'll get onto a little bit later. It's tough times for Mercedes at the minute, and obviously George at the end of the race, chasing vital points for the team, unfortunately had a brake testing incident with Alonso, which left Mercedes with a double D and F in the end, which further emphasises the point that Mercedes are just really struggling right now. In qualifying, Sainz put out a good showing, but ultimately those 2 laps that Max put in Q3 took him to pole. He'd been struggling as well in Q1 and Q2 to get a full grip of the car, but he just put in 2 monster laps, as Max always does, and he was able to claim the pole position. I was hoping for better things of Leclerc, but he bailed out of that last lap after making a small mistake, and that was that. Perez fell down in the grid after picking up a penalty, so the top 3 going into the race was Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. Now, I woke up on Sunday morning to catch the full race replay, and I did not expect to see that Max Verstappen DNF. I mean, it's been 2 whole years since he had a mechanical failure. Absolutely unbelievable, mind blown, just like his brakes, unbelievable scenes. Max and Carlos both got away well. Max had the edge. He was starting to pull away. On the timing sheets, you could see he was getting close to a second, but Sainz still stayed within DRS. I think Max made a small mistake on one of the corners, which allowed Carlos Sainz to get back in within overtaking range, and he made the overtake round the outside, and then from that point on, Max was struggling, struggle city. Something looked like it had just gone kaput in his car, and before you know it, smoke was coming out of that back right tyre. Quite a funny tweet from the official Alpine account. I think they tweeted in all caps, double overtake on Max Verstappen, which was quite funny, but it was quite clear that Max had a problem with his car at this point. He trundled his way down to the pit lane before a small explosion, and that was that. That was the end of Max's race. Absolutely incredible. We've been waiting 2 years for that, and the race was wide open. Well, what we thought at that point, that the race was wide open. At least we know now that Red Bull, and specifically Max Verstappen, he's not going to win every single race in the 2024 season. In the end, we didn't get a wheel-to-wheel battle for the finish. Carlos Sainz put in an incredible performance 16 days after his appendix surgery. Absolutely unreal performance from the smooth operator himself. In the end, I think Ferrari recognised how important this race result was for both Sainz and Leclerc. No fighting, no team orders, a clear instruction, get that 1-2 and seal those points. And fair play, they've learnt from those mistakes in the past. The battle between them last year at Monza was not going to repeat itself this time. And it was great to see the scenes on the podium. To hear the Italian national anthem was incredible. To hear the engineers sing it as well. I think we're all bored of the Dutch and the Austrian national anthem at this point, so it's just great to see some different scenes, and the Italian national anthem is top tier anyway. Lando Norris picked up 3rd place as well, stellar job from him. There was some last lap drama between Alonso and George Russell. The scenes were actually quite scary in the end because George Russell's car ended up on its side in the middle of the track. He had no visibility of what was going on behind him, or to the side of him, I should say. And if you listen to the team radio, you could hear the panic on his voice, screaming red flag, red flag, red flag. And to be honest, I don't know why that wasn't red flag straight away. I don't know why it was a virtual safety car in the end, but thankfully George was okay. But the big question was, did Alonso brake test him? On the onboard footage, it didn't look like anything deliberate had happened from Alonso's point of view, but when they looked into the data and compiled all the laps of that race, the pace of that line was particularly slow, and they deemed that was worthy enough of a 20-second time penalty. That's a big old penalty for Alonso. I think he came out after the race and said it was almost tactical racing. You take each line and each corner differently at different stages in the race, and maybe he's hinting at how racing has changed over the years and how differently decisions are being policed. But it was a scary incident, you can't lie. The way George's car landed, if another car had collided into him, that could have been fatal. I think Alonso was just being Alonso. He was trying to be that wily, wise fox, but probably on this occasion it was a little bit too far. Maybe the accident, the way that George's car landed, made it worse than it seemed, but in my opinion the penalty was justified. So overall, not the wheel-to-wheel racing we expected to see once Max Verstappen had DNF'd, but it was great to see the scenes of a double Ferrari podium. You know, I think Carlos Sainz said it himself as well in the interview with Martin Brundle post-race. You know, it's been a roller coaster of a year for him, you know, finding out that he won't be extended, finding out that Hamilton's coming in to take his seat, to the great performance in Bahrain, to the appendicitis, to Ollie Behrman taking over and doing a great job, to now this race result. It's been a mad year for Carlos, you know, and he said that he's still jobless for next year, which is true. You know, he hasn't got a seat for next year, but if he keeps putting in performances like that, one of the big boys has got to snap him up. In my opinion, a Red Bull seat would be ideal for him. I don't think Perez is as good as Sainz. It looks like Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo aren't quick enough for that seat just yet. And so that seat, he's got Carlos's name written on it. And then we'll see how Audi perform when they come into the paddock in 2026. But yeah, let us know your thoughts and opinions on the Australian Grand Prix down below. Where will Sainz end up next year? And is it going to be business as usual for Max Verstappen in Japan next race? But cheers for watching and listening, everyone. Vamos, Carlos, and peace out.